Kelowna became friends because both of our organizations obviously were tied to remembrance. And so I met him within a month of his run. And by the time he got to Arlington, he was carrying the Honor and Remember flag. I don't know if you've all seen the Honor and Remember flag. I don't have one with me to show you.
Augie has one on his arm.
He has one on his arm. Here's this flag right here that's on the shirt. It's a symbol that we, as an organization, are establishing as a public symbol of remembrance. Actually, it's adopted in 24 states now as the state symbol of remembrance in those states. California, I was told by an assemblyman the other day, is going to be the next one. So he's working on that. That's no, thank you. And so it's very important, right, that the public understands what sacrifice is all about. The veterans get it, right? The active duty get it. The families that lost their loved ones, they get it. But there's 95% of the public that don't understand what sacrifice is all about. And so why not give them a safe and easy and non-threatening way to appreciate sacrifice, right? Not by being sad and, oh my gosh, we've lost lives. But what did those lives do for us, right? Those lives have given us the ability to be here right now and say and do whatever we want. It's because of those men and women, not only that served, but didn't get to come home and be veterans, right? And so now, fast forward 10 years later, actually it was 8 years later, and both of our organizations, John and myself, we merged together. John went off to do other things, and I said, John, we're coming up on 10 years. Both of our organizations started in 08. It's going to be the 10th anniversary. There's no longer 3,800 that lost their lives. That number now in the last 8, 10 years has grown exponentially. And I often get the question, how did we get to 20,000? When I look at on the Google website, collectively there's only been 7,000 have died in Iraq and Afghanistan. Yeah, there's been 7,000 that died in Iraq and Afghanistan, but there's another 13,000 that died trying to get over there, or in training, or maybe they came back and were battle scarred, right? And were affected by PTSD. So what we did was, we didn't want to just recognize battle casualties. I will tell you that a parent doesn't care how their loved one dies. They don't think about, oh my gosh, he got shot, or he took his own life. That loss is so powerfully and emotionally potent, right? I cannot look a family member in the eye and say, your loss isn't as important as their loss. And so collectively, what was the best thing for us to do? Is to identify every single casualty that we could possibly find who died during the War on Terror and honor them all. So we worked with the DOD, and the Department of the Army, and the Department of the Navy, and we collected every single fallen name that we possibly could. And then we went a step further. We created a website that if you couldn't find your loved one or your friend, you could put them on there. And they would go into the Trail of Honor. And so we now have 19,985 names, which has now grown in the last 2 weeks with a number of helicopter crashes, which just saddens me, to now 20,000. And I will tell you that we're going to keep adding names every day until we get to Arlington. And on August 5th, when we get to Arlington, we're going to read the last name of the last man or woman who gave their life for this country. This will be the most comprehensive fallen veteran tribute ever compiled. Guys, have you ever heard of anybody doing this? Taking the names of so many and naming them out loud every mile across this country? Out loud, every mile. And if you don't believe it, watch our live feed. We've got a live feed on our website, and you can hear these men and women calling these names out loud every single mile. It just, we're all crying every day, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not statistics. Each one of these men and women had a mom and a dad. Many of them had a spouse, siblings, friends, and they deserve to be heard. And if nobody's going to hear it, we're going to say it to the atmosphere if we have to. But that is why this is so important. Because this country needs to remember. They don't have to be sad about it. They just need to recognize it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, my son came to me one day and said, "Dad, I joined the Army." This was in 2003. I said, "Son, are you crazy? Iraq was in full swing." Right? He said, "Dad, I think I can make a difference. I got a skill set." I said, gave him a hug, and I said, "I'm proud of you. Go for it." You know? And he went through his training, and he did his whatever he had to do. He went through advanced and basic, and then all kinds of other schools. He wasn't over in Iraq for 6 weeks before he wasn't coming home again. And I will tell you, as parents, how many are parents in here? Right? How many, I don't want to make you really sad, but you don't want to lose your kids, right? Nobody wants to lose their kids. But somebody, as long as we have a standing military, some kids are not coming home, right? I mean, it's just inevitable. And so what, as a nation, is the very least we can do? You guys get it. I'm not preaching to the choir, right? The very least we can do is say thank you. Is to appreciate the families that have given their loved ones. These men and women aren't coming home. They're not here for us to thank them. They're not, those in this room that are veterans, we can hug you and thank you and shake your hand and buy you a beer. We can't do that to those men and women that didn't come home. All we can do is hopefully find their families and say thank you, right? But we all don't know who those families are, right? You don't know. I mean, I don't usually do that. I just said that tonight because I never like to talk about my son. But Paulette and Augie, they lost their son. Anybody else in this room lose a relative? This lady here I haven't met yet. You wouldn't know unless somebody said something to you, right? And I will tell you, there are tens of thousands of families out there who are grieving for their loved one who you don't know. So how do you communicate to them? What do you say? I mean, you can't put up necessarily a banner, you know, to communicate that. And this is one way, what we're doing. 120 days, 20,000 heroes, one name at a time, for 5 months, through 19 states. We're going to make sure that these men and women are not forgotten. I don't know, I wish I knew how many we've read already, but we've run 149 miles so far. Those are just contiguous miles. But we've run collectively probably, just give me a pop guess, how many miles collectively? Close to 1,000 maybe?
For the, oh, well, yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody together probably have run 1,000 miles, if you think of everybody who's run a mile, collectively. 1,000 miles in 3 days already. Can you imagine what we're going to get to in Arlington?
And like you said, one stop that we had today, we had 43 soldiers in just one stop.
That died on one day.
One day.
Because you might not know this, but every mile is a independent date of death. So we took every casualty in America, starting with the USS Cole. So this is in the last 18 years. And we identified every unique date of death. And then starting with the Cole, we are running across this nation based on those dates. We're up to 2001 right now, I think. And we're 3 days in. I think the whole first day and half the second day were just 2,000. And so we had to make a plan, but the uniqueness of that is that everyone who died on that day will be honored at that mile. Very, very unique. So obviously there are some very large casualty dates. 9/11, right? 56 military men and women lost their lives on 9/11. That's a very significant mile. I mean, I can't even name all the multiple casualties that we've had in different areas. The Chinook on August 6th, 2011. 31 went down in that helicopter. There were 4 Marines that went down in a helicopter just the other day. These will all be honored at a particular mile. Every time there's a loss, we add them to the end as we get closer to Army. And so I want everyone to understand that what you're doing to help support us to get through the end of this day and get us fueled for the next day. I don't know how many miles we have tomorrow, 44, 50 miles tomorrow.
43
I
hours.
mean, it means so much to us to have you sacrifice yourselves, take good time out of your day, and come and say, hey, we're going to feed a bunch of yahoos or sweating and running around the country, you know, with no socks.
Thanks for giving me hugs today.
It means the world to us because we can get another mile down the road, and we don't have to spend another dollar, you know, to get there. We don't have to fundraise on one more thing, you know, to get us one more place. So this is a tremendous, tremendous blessing to us. And so one of the things that we do as part of our ceremony is sometimes we have families that we present to, and I don't know any families that we're going to present to today. Are you a part of this post, or did you come in?
I live in Cayman.
Look,
I
okay.
just came, yeah, I'm gonna, yeah, there's someone tomorrow.
Okay. Would you tell us who you are and who you lost? Would you mind?
My name is Victoria Haddock. I lost my son Ryan, Senior Airman Ryan Barkley, in February 17th, 2015.
So sorry. One of the things that is important to us in the evening is that all of the names that we ran for that day, we like to reread, because we didn't have a lot of people at our miles today. As a matter of fact, I don't know that we had anybody standing at a mile today. And so we like to reread those names so that everyone can hear the names of those that we honored today. And so we ask our runners to read those because they were the ones that had their boots on the ground today. And I'm going to ask you guys, thank you, Art.
Can you hold
they
this?
would go ahead and honor us.
Can you hold this?
What am I showing?
These guys.
You really?
Yeah.
Let me show these guys.
First Lieutenant Justin Palmer, United States Marine Corps. Lance Corporal William Lawrence Griffin II, World's Finest, United States Marine Corps. Staff Sergeant Richard Michael Roback, Jr., United States Army. Corporal Walter Incente Salazar, World's Finest, United States Marine Corps. Staff Sergeant Eugene Barber, Thomas Eugene Barber, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Jonathan Clark Gofol, United States Air Force. Private Robert Chad Alville, United States Army. Petty Officer 3rd Class Reuben Lujan, United States Navy. Sergeant Bob Darren McDonald, United States Army. Chief Officer 2 Gregory Earl Montgomery, United States Army. Chief Officer 4 George Philip Perry, United States Army.
Major Robert Leslie Olson, United States Army. Sergeant Rodriguez Rafael Olvera, United States Army. Petty Officer Joel Irvin Cooley, United States Navy. Seaman Gerald Brewer Tate, United States Navy. Petty Officer Raleigh Lee Robbins, United States Navy. Sergeant First Class James Neal Motley, United States Army. Sergeant First Class Linda R. Streets, United States Army. Petty Officer Travis Wagner, United States Navy. Private William John Farlow, United States Army. Private First Class Autumn Francis Leslie, United States Army. Chief Petty Officer Kendrick Slayers Broughton, United States Navy.
Technical Sergeant Troy Hunter Thomas, United States Air Force. Private First Class Marty Joe McMillan, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Benjamin Gregory Luffy, United States Air Force. Petty Officer Second Class Darrell Lynn McNutt Jr., United States Navy. Private First Class Chico Delbert Clark, United States Army. Lance Corporal Robert James Ramito, United States Marine Corps. Senior Recruit Demetrius Mitchell Haskin Jr., United States Navy. Technical Sergeant Tommy Lee Brewer, United States Air Force. Sergeant Specialist Eric James Rock, United States Air Force. Specialist Linda Derlin Harrison, United States Air Force. Excuse me, Army.
Specialist Adam Edwin Hill, U.S. Army. Lieutenant Gregory Scott Fulcom, U.S. Navy. Captain Justin Brian Sanders, U.S. Air Force. Master Sergeant Robert Joseph Bagman, U.S. Air Force. Petty Officer Second Class Scott Michael Danielson, U.S. Navy. Petty Officer Leroy O'Neill Dykes, U.S. Navy. Private First Class Joshua Lynn Phillips, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Miguel Ulysses Polanco, U.S. Army. Private Second Class Christopher Jacob Ware, U.S. Army. Senior Airman Michael David Snow, U.S. Navy. Dental Assistant Sean Bartholomew Grimes, U.S. Navy.
Sergeant Kevin Andrew Kern, U.S. Army. Master Sergeant Daryl Danielle Aldridge, United States Marine Corps. Staff Sergeant Anthony James Sonnier, U.S. Army. Chief Warrant Officer 2, Eric Paul Larson, U.S. Army. Chief Warrant Officer 4, Johnny Wayne Deuce, U.S. Army. Sergeant Robert Franklin Ward Jr., U.S. Army. Master Sergeant Michael Eugene Lane, U.S. Air Force. Tech Sergeant Dean James Shelby, United States Air Force. Tech Sergeant Edwin Bruce Richardson, United States Air Force. Master Sergeant Eric Gordon Bowman, U.S. Air Force. Technical Sergeant Ernest Blauis, United States Air Force. Staff Sergeant Gregory Todd Scaruppi, United States Air Force. Master Sergeant James Benetti, United States Air Force.
Staff Sergeant James Patrick Ferguson, United States Air Force. Staff Sergeant John Lee Sienkiewicz, United States Air Force. Senior Airman Matthew Earl Kidd, United States Air Force. Tech Sergeant Michael Eugene East, United States Air Force. Staff Sergeant Paul Joseph Blancato, United States Air Force. Staff Sergeant Paul Eno Kramer, United States Air Force. Staff Sergeant Randy Veer Johnson, United States Air Force. Staff Sergeant Richard Lee Summerall, United States Air Force. Staff Sergeant Ronald Lee Elkin, United States Air Force. Major Frederick V. Watkins III, United States Air National Guard.
Petty Officer 3rd Class Donnie Clay Chapman Jr., United States Navy. Master Sergeant Kevin Grant Hill, United States Air Force. Master Sergeant Brian Look, United States Army. Master Sergeant Josh Albert Hatcher Jr., United States Air Force. Lieutenant John Anthony Scott Jr., United States Navy. Lance Corporal Jeremiah James Jolly, United States Marine Corps. Lance Corporal James Lawrence Houghton, United States Marine Corps. Petty Officer 1st Class Robert Dean Steele Jr., United States Navy. Private 1st Class Jeremy Wayne McGill, United States Army. Private 1st Class Michael James Wozniak, United States Army. Petty Officer 2nd Class Aaron John Teets, United States Navy. Private 1st Class Regina Martinez, United States Army.
Lance Corporal Stephen Salinas, United States Marine Corps. Master Chief Petty Officer Charles Dillian Major, United States Navy. Technical Sergeant Scott Allen Miller, United States Air Force. Sergeant Richard Nelson Boudreau II, United States Army. Sergeant Philip Michael Feely, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Jason Matthew Faley, United States Air Force. Specialist Jason Douglas Wildfong, United States Air Force. Sergeant Troy James Westberg, United States Army. Command Sergeant Major Adner Michael Batts, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Robert Earl Griffin Jr., United States Air Force. Lieutenant William Lee Davenport, United States Navy. Hospital Medic Eric Anthony Palacio, United States Navy.
Specialist Jose Manuel Vasquez Alicia, U.S. Army. Sergeant First Class Stephen John Ronnie, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Craig Michael Drury, U.S. Air Force. Private First Class. Petty Officer First Class Frederick James Foster, U.S. Navy. Sergeant First Class Anthony Peter Bolaño III, U.S. Army. Senior Chief Petty Officer Ronald Lee Hillen, U.S. Navy. Petty Officer. Seaman Recruit Sky Cody Murphy, U.S. Navy. Senior Airman George Albert Ritchie, U.S. Air Force. Seaman Calvin Christopher Afford, U.S. Navy. Private First Class Ethan John Rye, U.S. Army.
Captain Joseph Anthony Tangitella, United States Air Force. Petty Officer 3rd Class Nathaniel Copeland Jr., United States Navy. Specialist Clifton Dion Willis, United States Army. Airman Apprentice Andrew Thomas Pippick, United States Navy. Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth John Haganen Jr., United States Air Force. Chief Warrant Officer 4 Lance Leonard Hill, United States Army. Chief Warrant Officer 4 George Anthony Grace, United States Army. Petty Officer 2nd Class Sharonda Yvette Middleton, United States Navy. Lance Corporal Justin Travis Elrod, United States Marine Corps. Petty Officer 1st Class James Roger Cavan, United States Navy.
Sergeant First Class Lemuel Maga, United States Army. Seaman Recruit Mamolo Sangu Cooper, United States Navy. Lance Corporal Benjamin Soto, World's Finest, United States Marine Corps. Specialist Jose Enriquez Lopez, United States Army. Private First Class Michael Wesley Hurt, United States Army. Lance Corporal David Patrick Clayton May, World's Finest, United States Marine Corps. Tech Sergeant Keith Anthony Slingloff, United States Air Force. Specialist Andre Marquis Mobley, United States Army. Specialist Raul Ian Bean, United States Army. Tech Sergeant Michael Eugene Cox, United States Air Force. Airman Avril Michael Long, United States Navy. Petty Officer Third Class Albert Travolta Shank, United States Navy. Petty Officer Second Class Larhonda Ray Lee, United States Navy. Petty Officer Third Class Corey Curtis O'Brien III, United States Navy.
Commander James Earl Vinson Jr., United States Navy. Chief Warrant Officer 5, Joseph Llewellyn Whitstrom, United States Army. Petty Officer 3rd Class Aran Del Zelani, United States Navy. Tech Sergeant Robert Martin Flynn, United States Air Force. Chief Petty Officer Pedro Juan Gonzalez, United States Navy. Master Sergeant Stephen Lee Moser, United States Air Force. Is it Sergeant First Class? Sergeant First Class Tommy James Murphy, United States Army. Lieutenant Colonel Rennie Melville Corey Jr., United States Army. Major Charles Edward Lewis II, United States Air Force. Lieutenant Colonel George Strifford Martin III, United States Army. Corporal Jesus Adolfo Garcia III, United States Marine Corps.
Staff Sergeant Douglas Stewart Watson, United States Air Force. Private First Class Frank Rojas Madrigal, United States Army. Fireman Apprentice Lee Earl James Evans, United States Navy. Sergeant Adrian Carl Linear, United States Army. Petty Officer 3rd Class Michael Jeffrey Haas, United States Navy. Staff Sergeant Paul Adam Jasperson, United States Air Force. Private First Class Seth David Spellman, United States Marine Corps. Sergeant Brandon John Loosby, United States Army. Corporal Courtney Naylor, United States Marine Corps. Sergeant First Class William Neil Richard, United States Army.
Seaman Lance Alden Brewer, United States Navy. Seaman Recruit Timothy Jason Morando, U.S. Navy. Major James Allen Moreland, U.S. Army. Captain Robert Ian Colbert, U.S. Army. Sergeant Brian Gerardo Castellanos Reyes, U.S. Marine Corps. Master Chief Petty Officer David Mack Kelly, U.S. Navy. Private First Class. Private Second Class James Robert Tyre, U.S. Army. Lieutenant Commander Lorimel Arabe, U.S. Navy. Private First Class Lori Renee Small, U.S. Army. Sergeant Tommy Lamar Phillips, U.S. Army. Petty Officer First Class Jeffrey Michael Joyce, U.S. Navy. Corporal Marcus Christopher Manning, U.S. Marine Corps. Master Sergeant Karen Elizabeth Drew, U.S. Air Force.
Master Sergeant Joseph La Rochelle, United States Air Force. Sergeant Michael Lee Sr., United States Army. Specialist Larry Tariq Basali, United States Army. Sergeant Alan Christopher Keith, United States Army. Petty Officer 3rd Class Eric Kenyedi McGregory, United States Navy. Seaman Eric Todd McDonald, United States Navy. Lance Corporal Ryan Wade Phillips, World's Finest, United States Marine Corps. Chief Petty Officer Mary Ann Mitchell, United States Navy. And Captain James Elihu White, United States Army. Senior Airman Ryan Christopher Barkley, United States Air Force.
Is there anyone in this room who lost a friend or a family member that would like to say their name out loud? Anyone, raise your hand. I'll give you the microphone before we close this. No. As I said, each one of these names represents an individual who gave their life for our country and had a family waiting for them back home. They weren't a statistic. And I will tell you that of all the names that were read, some of them they just passed by your head as if, okay, it was just another name. But I will tell you, if you were the family member or friend of that individual when they got to that name, it would be the most powerful moment of this day. And that's what these families are waiting to hear, the name of their loved one spoken one more time. So I just ask as we close this portion that we just take a moment of silence to reflect on every one of those names that was read and remember what they did and why we have what we have. Just 10 seconds to think about those names. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Commander, for the opportunity to be able to honor these heroes in your facility. We thank all of you here who took the time to come out and be a part of this with us and to give so much of your time and talents. It is more than appreciated, believe me. Some of you have asked whether we had shirts and some other things. We do, and we'll bring some stuff in. I mean, obviously we can't go from one place to another without some kind of resources. Every day, gas alone is probably $300, and so everything helps offset whatever we've got. So Augie and some of the guys will bring in some stuff if you're interested. No pressure, just we have it if you're interested. One of the things we do have, which I think is really special, is we have a poster that has the name of all 20,000 that we're running for. It's really tiny, but the names are all on there. It's pretty phenomenal. So take a look at that at least. Take a picture of it so you have it. Commander, I'm going to turn it over to you, or however you'd like to conclude. Guys, no, wait a minute. Art wants to say something.
I just want to thank everybody for doing a great job tonight. Really appreciate what you guys are doing, and as a small token for appreciation, if you guys turn around or flip the stars in each table, you'll see that you guys can take that home, and it's a small reminder of this little town that we call Banning, California. All the runners can take it, and if you want to, it's just a small token.
Runners, for you guys to always remember your runners.
Remember us. It's just a way of saying that it's been an honor to be part of the great thing you guys are doing, which is remembering every veteran, the sacrifice, they made the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you have no idea. You're going to be on well, I know.
Thank you so much.